When Alec was still a kid who spent most of his days doing useless things like fishing around the capital, a flashy-looking magician named Elders suddenly walked up to him and asked if he was interested in magic. At first, Alec honestly thought Elders was Diddy's agent or some scammer. But no, Elders really just wanted to teach him magic. Elders started training him in a strange way. He told Alec to imagine the friends he would make in the future, and how he would need to protect them from monster attacks. By forcing him to picture his future friends dying if he failed, Elders used that pressure to push Alec harder. Thanks to those trauma-filled lessons, Alec learned magic at an insane speed. Even then, he was annoyed that it took him a whole day just to learn one spell. He didn't bother listening when Elders mumbled that normal people needed a whole month to learn that same spell. The moment Alec finally managed to cast it properly, he immediately begged Elders to teach him the next spell. But Elders told the impatient brat that one spell a day was enough. Alec sulked, completely dissatisfied. But Elders didn't change his mind. Instead, he said they would spend the rest of the day fishing. Alec sat there pouting the whole time like a kid who'd had his candy stolen. To calm him down, Elders stroked his ego a bit. He told Alec he had incredible talent for magic, that even without Elders' tutoring, Alec would definitely grow into a great magician someday. He told Alec to leave the rest to fate. Alec was stunned to hear that, and finally asked the question that had been sitting in his mind. If Alec was going to be amazing anyway, why was Elders bothering to teach him at all? Just as Elders was about to answer, his fishing rod bent sharply. He'd hooked a fish. Elders panicked because he'd never actually caught one before. Alec burst out laughing and helped him reel it in, teasing him that a magician as skilled as Elders should at least know how to handle a fish. Time went on like that, with the two of them living their lives as teacher and student, learning spells and wasting downtime fishing together. But one day, everything changed. Elders suddenly announced that he would be leaving the capital. Alec was crushed. It meant he might never see his teacher again. Before leaving, Elders left him with one last piece of advice. He told Alec that if he ever got the chance to become a court magician, he should refuse the offer. Alec couldn't understand why, and once again asked Elders why he had taught him magic in the first place. For a brief moment, Elders dropped his gloomy look and spoke about Alec's late mother. When she had been alive, she did him a huge favor, and teaching her son magic was his way of repaying that debt. That was the last day Alec saw his master. From then on, Alec studied like a maniac, and eventually got into the Royal Magic Academy, partly because he wanted to see Elders again. There, he found out that Elders had once been a student at that same academy. Not only that, he had graduated at the top of his class and had become a court magician shortly afterwards. However, a few years later he'd been kicked out of that position. Only then did Alec fully understand why Elders had warned him not to become a court magician. But instead of following that advice, Alec went in the opposite direction. He decided to become a court magician specifically so he could change the unfair imperial court from the inside. Long story short, he pulled it off. He became a court magician in the end. He just didn't know how much he would regret it. That realization hit him like a truck when Crown Prince Regulus kicked him out of his adventurer party in the middle of a dungeon. Alec asked the prince why he was being fired. The blonde prince calmly told him it was because Alec was useless. Regulus bragged about how he always fought at the front, risking his life to defeat monsters. The fire magician Lenny burned the monsters with her powerful spells. Their tanks blocked enemy attacks, and everyone contributed on the front lines. Meanwhile, Alec stayed in the back and only cast what Regulus called pathetic support magic. Regulus declared that they didn't need a loser like Alec in their party, and then went even further, saying Alec didn't even deserve to be called a court magician. Alec tried to explain why he only used support magic, but Regulus cut him off, completely uninterested in listening. Lenny backed him up, calling Alec a coward who didn't have the guts to go deeper into the dungeon, and who always held them back. Alec silently nodded in agreement. Lenny added that they had tolerated Alec this long only because the king himself had ordered him to join their party. Now that the prince had decided to throw him out, she saw no reason to act polite anymore. Regulus sneered and said Alec must have gotten the top score at the academy by sucking up to the professors for extra credit. Then he noticed Alec's dagger and snapped, demanding why a mere commoner was carrying a weapon when such things were forbidden. Alec tried to explain that they would need the dagger for the next floor, but Regulus only grew more furious. He snatched the dagger away and grabbed Alec by the collar, announcing that no one in his party was allowed to disobey him. Then he tore off Alec's court wizard robe and told him he didn't deserve to wear it. Devastated and humiliated, Alec had no choice but to leave the dungeon. Even after all that, Alec still wanted to help Regulus and the others survive. He went home and wrote down detailed notes about how to deal with the lower floors of the dungeon, especially since Regulus lacked enough magic power. The next day, Alec went to the palace to try and deliver those notes to the king, but the guards stopped him at the gate. They informed him that he had already been removed from his position as court magician. He was now just another commoner, and commoners were not allowed inside the palace without permission. Alec was stunned. While he stood there in shock, Lenny appeared, just to twist the knife a little deeper. She told him to get lost and casually walked back into the palace. Alec desperately called out, asking her to listen just once. He begged her to take the notes he had prepared to the king, reminding her that the king had personally appointed him as court magician and ordered him to join the prince's party. Lenny took the papers from his hands, only to tear them up and stomp on them. She then ordered the guards to throw the commoner out. Alec was left standing alone in the middle of the city, hopeless, jobless, and completely crushed. At that point, he finally understood he should have listened to elders and never become a court magician. Just then, he heard a familiar voice call his name. Alec turned around to see a red-headed girl staring at him before she ran forward and pulled him into a tight hug. It took him a moment to process what was happening, but then he recognized her, Yora, an old friend from his academy days. They sat down together to catch up. Alec told Yora everything that had happened, from being kicked out of the prince's party to losing his position as court magician. Yora was furious. She cursed the kingdom for its discrimination between nobles and commoners. Alec quickly tried to calm her down before anyone overheard. Then Yora said something that surprised him. She claimed it was actually a good thing that he got fired. Alec barely reacted. After everything he'd gone through in the last 2 days, nothing really surprised him anymore. Yora reminded him of a promise she once made, to bring him into her adventurer party someday. Alec remembered that clearly. Yora then revealed that she had come to the capital for exactly that purpose. She stood up, stretched out her hand to him, and asked him to dive into dungeons by her side. Alec was happy to receive the offer, but after being fired and insulted, he had started to doubt himself. Yora didn't care about any of that. She told him that the only magician she wanted in her party was him, and that no one else could replace him. Her words hit him right in the heart. He got emotional and immediately accepted her offer. Yora grinned and welcomed him into her A-rank party, lasting period. The very next day, Alec left the country with Yora. That night, he dreamed again of Elder's warning. Don't become a court magician. A few days later, news of Alec's departure reached Regulus and the others. None of them cared. Regulus commented that Alec had been praised as a genius at the academy, and he had high hopes for him. But in the end, he believed they only wasted their time on him. Lenny brushed it off, saying they didn't need to worry because a pure-blooded noble would soon join the party and make them even stronger. Meanwhile, Alec and Yora arrived at Fizzle, the city of dungeons. Yora explained that this city was a base for countless adventurers because it didn't discriminate between nobles and commoners. She was eager to get Alec registered in her party as soon as possible. But when they arrived at the guild, reality slapped them again. The receptionist told Alec that he couldn't register directly as part of Yora's party because they explored beyond floor 30 of the dungeon. By guild rules, a person had to be a member for at least 2 years before being allowed to join such a deep-diving party. Yora threw a mini tantrum, demanding they make an exception for Alec, but the receptionist refused. Yora then asked if her friend Kra hadn't talked to them about this already. The receptionist replied that Kra had indeed come and even tried to threaten them into letting Alec join. But the staff dealt with crazy people like her every day, and no one took her seriously. With no choice, Alec and Yora left the guild empty-handed and took a break at a public park. As they ate lunch, Yora told him their party had already reached floor 52 of the dungeon, and they couldn't just sit and wait 2 whole years for him. Still, she wasn't the type to give up. If they couldn't go to dungeons deeper than floor 30 together, she decided they would use the shallower dungeons as warm-up runs. Alec agreed, and they immediately headed to a low-level dungeon filled with insect-type monsters. Yora used reinforcement magic to boost Alec's speed, and together they cut through the monsters like it was nothing. But after a while, Yora noticed that the number of bugs wasn't decreasing. In fact, they seemed to be getting stronger. Alec agreed, pointing out that something must be wrong with the nest. Something was stirring them up, but that it was still manageable. As they continued to fight, Yora activated her shield, then charged ahead to find the monster's nest. Alec shouted that she was taking a huge risk, but Yora brushed it off. She said this level of danger was nothing, and told Alec he seemed to have lost his edge. The Alec she remembered would have considered these monsters a joke. She told him to trust her and return to his true self. Alec realized she was right. The only thing holding him back was his shaken confidence. He remembered Elder's lesson one day he would have to save his friends from danger. Using that memory as his motivation, he decided to go on the offensive. He started by blasting several monsters with fireballs, then finishing off the rest with his dagger. But soon, a massive swarm surrounded them. Yora still didn't panic. She cast a barrier around them, giving Alec enough time to prepare a powerful wide-area spell. A moment later, his magic detonated, completely disintegrating the horde of bugs. Once things calmed down, Yora clapped him on the back and told him he still had it. Just then, the ground beneath them began to shake. A gigantic earthworm burst out, lunging at Yora and nearly swallowing her whole. Alec shouted that he would save her and told her to activate her shield. Yora trusted him completely and cast her shield spell, and Alec summoned a massive fire serpent that crashed into the monster, incinerating the earthworm until it turned to ash. Yora climbed out, completely unharmed by the flames. She ran over to Alec, grinning, and told him he was still the strongest attack mage she knew. Their fight had reminded her of their academy days. Back then, they had been struggling against a 5-headed dragon whose hide was too tough, and whose attacks never seemed to stop. Their weapons barely scratched it. But after enough prep time, Alec fired a single devastating spell that obliterated the monster. Thanks to that one attack, they cleared the 68th floor of the dungeon and set a new academy record. And now, at last Alec was going to rejoin that same legendary party of friends again. Part 2. Rewritten. After they defeated the level 68 boss back in the day and returned to the Magic Academy, their name spread like wildfire. Everyone treated them as the best batch of students the academy had seen in years. Even their strict instructor Rosie knew there was something special about the 4 of them. They moved and fought like a single unit, their teamwork flawless and their synergy unmatched. They trudged back from the dungeon covered in cuts and bruises, but all 4 of them were smiling. They hadn't just beaten the record of reaching the 68th floor, they had crushed it. The previous record-holding party had only made it to the 32nd floor. Finally, graduation day arrived. Instructor Rosie announced their final rankings. Rain came in 4th, Kra took 3rd place, Yora was the runner-up, and Alec of course was the top student, by far. He became the most outstanding graduate in recent history, and was named valedictorian. Back then, they were overflowing with hope. They joked around with Rosie and got smacked around a bit for making fun of their instructor, but even those hits felt like warm, happy memories. As they walked out of the academy together, other students watched them with envy, convinced they were witnessing the birth of a legendary party that would go down in history. None of them knew that Alec would soon decide he didn't want to continue as an adventurer, and instead wanted to work as a court magician. His party members were stunned when they heard it, but they also understood that being a court magician meant better pay and a more stable life with fewer life or death battles. Even though they were disappointed, none of them blamed him. They wished him luck and sent him off with sincere smiles. Yora made him promise that one day, they would fight together again in the same party. In the present, that promise was finally on its way to being fulfilled. Yora and Alec celebrated in a bar. After just one glass of alcohol, Yora ended up completely blackout drunk. She ranted about how unfair it was that they weren't allowed to dive into deeper dungeons together yet. But before long, she fell asleep right there on the bench. Alec smiled, remembering that she had always been like this, even back in their academy days. A loud, intense, reckless idiot with a good heart. Like a true S, he placed his jacket over her shoulders so she could sleep more comfortably. But one of the guys in the bar didn't like what he was seeing. He walked over and started mocking Alec for acting like a simp and a beta male. Alec ignored him. The guy clearly had anger issues and probably watched too many fake tough guy speeches. Irritated by being ignored, the man raised his bottle ready to smash it over Alec's head. Before it could land, Alec casually cast a mana shield. The bottle hit the invisible barrier and shattered harmlessly. Only then did Alec turn to face him. To Alec's surprise, the man grinned, clearly pleased he finally got a reaction. He said he already knew Alec was a former court magician, and that he never expected someone from such an elite position to be wandering around trying to become an adventurer. The sudden attitude shift was strange enough, but what confused Alec even more was what the man did next. The large, muscular guy took a card out of his pocket, an adventurer pass, and placed it on the table in front of Alec. Alec frowned and asked what he was trying to pull. The man replied that it was a token of apology for testing him with the bottle. But there was a condition. Alec had to show him his magic. Only then could he take the pass. Alec was still confused when Yora, half asleep and groggy, suddenly woke up. She looked at the man and called him Guildmaster, asking what he was doing there. Alec froze. Why would the Guildmaster just hand him a pass? The man shrugged like it was no big deal and didn't take back the card. Instead, he led them out of the bar and down into an underground area. He explained that this was the guild's underground training ground, where he tested parties that wanted to increase their rank. This was where Alec would have to prove his strength. Yora tried to argue that this wasn't the best time, since Alec had been drinking. But Alec said he still had plenty of mana left to fight. The Guildmaster formally introduced himself as Levy, and the name instantly rang a bell in Alec's mind. Levy was a legendary mage who used to lead an S-ranked party. Levy laughed it off, saying those days were blurry memories now, and then plainly stated the conditions. Alec just needed to impress him with his magical ability. That was all. They both stepped into the training area and got ready. Alec made the first move, firing an offensive thunderbolt spell straight at Levy. The Guildmaster dodged effortlessly and countered with water magic, hurling spheres of water at him. Alec dodged but quickly realized Levy had the advantage in range. If he stayed at a distance, he would lose, so he decided to close the gap and turn it into close quarters combat. But instead of backing away, Levy slammed his fists into the ground and used reinforcement magic on himself, massively boosting his speed. In an instant, he darted toward Alec, sidestepped him at the last second, and began circling him at ridiculous speed before launching a powerful punch. Alec barely managed to block with a mana shield. The shield shattered from the sheer force of the blow, and Alec was sent flying into the wall. Levy was impressed he even survived that hit. Most people would have been knocked out instantly, but Alec climbed out of the dust cloud and calmly commented that Levy really was a true S-rank adventurer. Levy was thrown off by how relaxed he seemed. He expected fear, not confidence. Alec admitted that he kept forgetting something. He was no longer a court magician tied down by strict rules, forced to only use defensive spells. Now he was free to fight however he wanted. He could finally use his full arsenal. Levi laughed and told him to come at him with everything he had. Alec raised his staff again, this time shaping it into a magical blade. Levi readied himself and threw more water projectiles. This time, Alec slipped past the first one and sliced the second out of the air. He pretended to rush in aggressively, forcing Levi to respond in kind. That was exactly what Alec wanted. When Levi used his self-boosting magic again and dashed at him, Alec triggered a trap spell he'd secretly prepared and detonated a thunderbolt right in Levi's path, then dashed through the smoke, slashing past him. Levi stood still for a moment, acknowledging that Alec was truly impressive. He had already outplayed his magic. But to Alec's surprise, Levi wasn't done yet. The guildmaster pulled out a pair of magical gauntlets covered in dragon scales. The moment he put them on, his power shot through the roof. He charged straight at Alec again, and Alec barely dodged as Levi's punch carved a crater into the training ground floor. Alec refused to fall back. He blasted Levi with a lightning spell, but Levi shook it off and kept moving. He pushed through the attack and swung again. Alec blocked with a shield, but was still sent sliding across the ground. While trying to think of a way to deal with this monster of a man, Alec watched as Levi activated another ability on his gauntlets. They glowed faintly, healing his injuries. Alec realized the longer this fight dragged on, the worse his chances would be, so he went all in, charging forward and slashing at Levi from every angle. The guildmaster blocked every single strike and taunted Alec to hit harder. Alec answered with some trash talk of his own, which clearly got under Levi's skin. Annoyed, Levi attempted an even stronger punch, but Alec dodged and found an opening to counter. Levi grew more and more irritated, swinging his fists wildly, smashing into the walls as Alec slipped just out of reach. Levi didn't let up, constantly hunting for an opening. Alec kept blocking and countering, trying to line up a finishing blow. When he finally struck, he learned something the hard way. The guildmaster was far tougher than he looked. Even a solid hit barely slowed him. Levi raised both fists and slammed them down in a double-handed smash, kicking up a massive dust cloud. For a moment, it looked like Alec was done. But when the dust cleared, Alec was still standing. He rushed forward for another strike, but right at that moment his mana gave out. His magical blade vanished, his legs buckled, and he collapsed onto the ground, completely drained. Dorha immediately rushed in and used her regeneration magic to heal him. Suddenly, Rain appeared in the training ground, teasing Levi for being an S-ranked adventurer and still using his strongest skills against someone ranked below him. Levi told him to shut up, insisting he had only been testing Alec's limits and had already decided to pass him. With that, Rain picked Alec up and carried him to a room where he could rest, while sitting in an oddly weird posture by his side for some reason. They talked for a while about how long it's been since they've all been together like this, drinking and joking in the same room again. Just as the atmosphere starts to warm up, the receptionist suddenly bursts in, saying she urgently needs the guildmaster. Without wasting a second, Levi grabs her by the face, drags her out of the room, and leaves with her, grumbling under his breath. Rain doesn't let the mood die. He grabs a few more bottles of booze, sits down, and asks Yora to tell him everything that's happened to Alec up until now. By the time she finishes her explanation, Rain is trembling with anger. He realizes Alec's so-called party in the royal capital made him carry everyone's luggage, forced him to do all the inventory work, never allowed him to use anything but defensive magic, and didn't even let him carry a dagger. Rain suddenly turns to Yora and asks, half in disbelief, how Alec even used defensive magic in the first place, since back in the academy that had been Rain's role, and Alec had never been particularly good at it. Yora calmly answers that Alec learned it from scratch afterward. He trained and trained until he got good enough. Now she says, his defensive magic is almost on par with hers. Rain realizes that after all that, after Alec babysat the crown prince, protected him, and supported the party for so long, they still tossed him aside and called him useless. Rage surges through him, and he unconsciously squeezes the bottle in his hand until it shatters, glass and liquor spilling everywhere. The noise wakes Alec up. He blinks, confused, then notices Rain sitting there. Before he can ask anything, Yora happily announces that the guildmaster has given him the pass. Alec is overjoyed. It means they can finally head into higher-level dungeons together as a proper party. But Rain raises a hand and says that can wait. There's something they have to do first. Alec has no idea what he's talking about. Rain explains it very clearly. First, they're going to take revenge. The plan, according to him, is to sneak into the royal city, infiltrate the palace, and beat the living daylights out of the prince and his party. Alec immediately shoots the idea down, saying there's no way they're doing something that insane. Yora backs him up, reminding Rain that attacking other parties is strictly forbidden. Alec puts a hand on Rain's shoulder and tells him that just going on amazing adventures together will be enough for him. He doesn't want to waste time thinking about what happened at court anymore. Rain pauses for a moment, then suddenly snaps his fingers, as if he's had a brilliant idea. They don't need to sneak into the palace at all. All they have to do is become the strongest party in the world. That alone would be enough to drive the prince crazy. And if the kingdom ever gets into trouble, they'll have no choice but to come begging for help from the strongest party in existence. At that point, it would feel incredible to turn them down to their faces. Alec thinks about it and realizes this is actually the best kind of revenge he could hope for. He agrees. They'll become the strongest party in the world. Meanwhile, in another room in the guild, an S-ranked adventurer named Krista lies badly wounded, breathing heavily while the receptionist hurriedly wraps bandages around her injuries. Levy doesn't look amused in the slightest. If even an S-ranked party is in this kind of condition, it means the entire guild is facing a serious problem. Krista tells Levy that her party members are still trapped, and that they need every bit of help they can get. Hearing that, the guildmaster's expression hardens. He immediately calls for an emergency meeting, summoning all the A-ranked adventurers, and explaining that they're launching a rescue mission on the 64th floor of the dungeon. Back in Alec's room, Alec ends up running into Kra for the first time in a long while. And it looks like both of her personalities have developed nicely since he last saw her. She immediately asks why he isn't at the meeting, and Alec explains that he stayed back because he's not an A-ranked adventurer, so he wasn't required to attend. Without another word, Kra casually casts a heal spell on him. In an instant, all his fatigue and injuries disappear completely. It's so effective that anyone watching would wonder why they were even bothering with bandages for Krista when this level of healing magic exists. A moment later, Yora and Rain burst into the room. Rain is practically yelling with excitement as he announces that they're going on a rescue mission. They quickly bring Alec up to speed. The dungeon they're heading into is a bit different from normal. On that particular floor, magic can't be used at all, which means everyone is completely dependent on potions and physical ability. Because of that restriction, the S-rank party that went in there ended up getting almost completely wiped out, and Krista had to force her way back alone just to ask for help. Alec turns to Kra and asks if she was really okay with working in a dungeon like that, since her specialty is healing magic, and a no-magic zone is basically her worst environment. Kra snaps back that of course she was against it from the beginning, but the idiot Rain overruled her and used his veto to force the party into that dungeon anyway. Rain fires back, and the two of them start bickering, throwing blame at each other like always. Yora ignores their squabbling and looks straight at Alec instead. She says it should be his decision whether they join this rescue mission or not, because he's the one who will have the main role and the hardest job dealing with the floor boss. Alec thinks about it, then calmly agrees to join the mission. Soon after, their group sets out for the dungeon. Standing in front of the entrance, Rain grins and declares that this is going to be the beginning of their party's legend. Before long, they arrive at the actual dungeon entrance, looming before them like the gate to another world. That floor of the dungeon had a nasty rule. Healing magic was completely disabled. No matter how skilled the mage, no recovery spells would work. Anyone who got hurt had to rely on potions and pure dodging skill to stay alive. Krista's teammates were stranded near the level 64 boss, but before Alec's group could reach them, they would normally have to clear every floor in between, including each floor's boss. Rain quickly realized that if they went level by level, they would arrive far too late. That's when Yora pulled out a glowing magic crystal. She explained that Krista had given it to them. With this single item, they could skip all the intervening floors and teleport directly to level 64. Alec immediately understood how incredible that was. It had to be an extremely rare and valuable magical item, but Krista clearly cared more about saving her party than about treasure or cost. She had even handed out crystals to other rescue teams just so they could reach the same floor as fast as possible. Yora added that the level 64 boss was rumored to be an undead-type enemy, which meant Kra's usual role would almost be useless. On top of that, Yora herself was primarily a support mage. In other words, most of the direct fighting and damage against the boss would fall on Alec's shoulders. Rain told Alec to conserve his mana as much as possible on the way there and let Rain handle the small fry. The last thing he wanted was for Alec to run out of energy in front of an undead boss. Kra agreed and warned everyone that from this point forward, they would quite literally be fighting against death itself. Even an S-ranked party had been wiped out here, so they couldn't afford to treat this lightly. Instead of feeling discouraged, Rain became even more fired up. He grinned and shouted that this was where the legend of their party would begin. With that, Yora tossed the magic crystal into the air. It shattered into light, and in the blink of an eye, the four of them were teleported straight into the dungeon's 64th floor. They found themselves standing in a dim, damp cave. The air smelled like rot and old bones. Almost immediately, skeletal warriors began pulling themselves together from piles of bones on the ground, rising up with shields and swords in hand. Rain didn't hesitate for even a second. He drew his spear and charged forward, thrusting and sweeping through the skeletons in front of him. In a few swift motions, he had already shattered several of them. Laughing that level 64 seemed pretty easy so far. The others watched silently as more and more skeletons crawled out of the darkness, marching toward them in rattling waves. Rain leaped directly into them, slashing and smashing any skeleton that got close. Yora, however, started to get worried. Rain had run outside the range of her support magic. She sprinted after him, shouting for him to come back, while Alec and Kra hurried to follow. Kra tried to calm Yora down, pointing out that Rain was carrying a powerful ancient artifact, a piercing black spear. Its blade was almost impossible to damage and always stayed razor sharp, a perfect weapon for a reckless idiot like him. Alec called out to Rain, asking if he needed backup, but Rain just laughed and said this was child's play for him. He kept tearing through the skeletons without breaking a sweat. Alec smiled faintly and moved up with the group, until a strange sensation crawled up his spine. He felt something off behind them, something that didn't match the usual presence of the undead. Instinctively, he spun around and fired a lightning bolt into the darkness. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing there. Alec blinked, confused, wondering what he had just done. He turned toward Yora and told her he thought something was behind her, but maybe it had just been his imagination. Even so, one thought kept nagging at him. He decided to test it. He drew his sword, lowered his stance, and suddenly lunged forward, slashing through what looked like empty air. His blade was stopped mid-swing. The blocked strike made sparks flash in midair, and in that instant, the invisible presence revealed itself. A hooded figure with a scythe, the embodiment of death itself. The Grim Reaper. Rain grinned, clearly impressed, and said that Alec wasn't nearly as washed up as he'd expected. He added that he'd already noticed there was an invisible enemy nearby, but he wasn't good at dealing with that type, so he'd been counting on Alec to handle it. The Grim Reaper pushed Alec back and counterattacked, swinging its scythe with terrifying speed. Alec parried and leaped away, retreating toward Rain's position. In that moment, Alec realized something important. Rain had complete confidence in him. He trusted Alec to watch his back, even when facing an unseen threat. It was a simple thing, but Alec hadn't felt that kind of trust and connection in a very long time. The feeling filled him with energy. He gathered his strength, jumped high into the air, and brought his magic blade down in a clean, powerful arc. His strike sliced straight through the Grim Reaper, ripping its form apart. The creature let out a silent scream before dissolving into nothing. Landing lightly, Alec turned toward Yora and asked if she had known about the invisible enemy too. She immediately apologized for not telling him sooner. Crave stepped in and said it was Rain's idea, so if Alec was going to be mad, he should blame Rain first. Alec just smiled at Rain instead, and promised that someday he'd return the favor. Rain smirked and replied that they could talk about that after they made it out of this dungeon alive. The four friends regrouped and formed a tight formation, ready to take on whatever came next. Soon Alec and Rain rushed back into the horde of skeletons, cutting them down side by side while Yora boosted them with reinforcement magic. Rain was in his element, spinning his spear in flashy, showy moves as he destroyed every skeleton in his path. Crave, using her pinpoint accuracy with a bow, picked off any undead that tried to flank or sneak up on them. Even Yora was forced to fend off enemies with her staff whenever they got too close. The wave of skeletons felt endless. No matter how many they destroyed, more seemed to appear. Realizing this was going nowhere, Alec called out to everyone to fall back toward him. He told them he would wipe out the entire group in one shot. Trusting him completely, his teammates immediately moved behind him and gave him space. Alec raised his hand and chanted, summoning a massive thunderbolt. In the next moment, lightning exploded across the battlefield, filling the cave with flash after flash of blinding light. The crackling energy tore through the horde, reducing the skeletons to smoking piles of charred bone. When the last echo faded, and the air finally stilled, the immediate danger was gone, and the floor around them was littered with blackened remains. Once they were safely out of immediate danger, Rain turned around and asked Alec. Rain turns to Alec and asks why he's been using only his Thunderbolt spell. When back at the academy he used to cast all kinds of offensive magic. Alec quickly comes up with an excuse and says that Thunderbolt is simply the fastest spell to cast in a dangerous situation, so he's just being efficient. Rain doesn't buy it. He can tell Alec is hiding something, but they're on a tight schedule, so he decides not to press the issue for now. Suddenly, a monstrous roar echoes from up ahead. They all assume that must be the boss room. Rain immediately tenses up, and the moment Yora buffs him with reinforcement magic, he sprints toward the sound faster than a lightning bolt. Alec is impressed by both Rain's speed and Yora's magic while he and the two girls race after him through the tunnel. They emerge into a wide-open chamber and find Rain perched casually on a ledge watching the scene below. A huge monster is rampaging around the area, chasing a bowl-cut adventurer in circles. Alec's first instinct is to jump in and save the guy. Rain, however, looks completely uninterested. He explains that the mage running around down there is Loki, the biggest jerk in a party known as Requilma. Kra nods, adding that Loki is a very crafty support mage even if his personality is terrible. Alec can hardly believe what he's hearing, especially as he watches Loki stumble around screaming at Rain to help him. Loki even yells that if he dies here he'll haunt Rain every single day. Rain remains unmoved and continues to sit there watching, utterly unimpressed. When Loki trips and falls flat on his face and it looks like the monster is about to crush him, Alec prepares to jump down and intervene. But Kra tells him to wait and keep watching. This is Loki's usual routine. Alec hesitates but listens. As the monster stomps toward Loki, a magic trap suddenly activates beneath it, exploding in a burst of lava. Alec stares in shock as the monster roars and staggers, only to step into another trap, triggering more blasts of fire. Loki gets up, turns around and starts laughing at the monster, mocking it and saying that only a complete idiot would fall for such obvious traps. His grin doesn't last long. Enraged, the monster starts charging up a powerful magic blast, clearly intending to obliterate him in one shot. Loki realizes he's cooked. He's seconds away from death until Rain finally moves. At the very last instant, Rain dives in and pulls Loki out of the blast's range, saving his life. Loki can't believe he's still breathing. While Rain and Loki regroup, Alec and the girls descend from the ledge to confront the monster directly. It lunges at Alec first, but Yora throws up a magical shield just in time, blocking the attack. Alec responds by casting a thunder spell, but the moment the lightning flies out, the monster turns away from him and starts charging straight toward Rain and Loki. Alec shouts a warning and fires another thunderbolt. The spell hits squarely, but when the dust settles, the monster is still barreling forward. His magic wasn't strong enough to stop it. Realizing the thing is about to catch him, Rain resorts to a desperate move. He turns and sprints directly toward the monster, then dives between its legs, juking it at the last second. As he passes, he grabs Loki and hurls him toward Kra's position. Kra and Loki crash to the ground together in a heap. Yora quickly orders Kra to get Loki back up to the ledge where it's safer while they focus on the monster. Rain plants his feet and readies his spear for another engagement. They wait until Kra gets Loki out of danger, then prepare for the real fight. Yora casts a full-strength buff, boosting all of Rain's stats. Empowered, Rain dashes toward the monster, dodging its strikes and leaping high into the air to drive his spear straight at its face. But the monster is far tougher than he expected. It thrashes violently and tosses Rain off, slamming him into the ground. Yora runs to help him, but the monster immediately tries to crush Rain where he lies. Yora reacts just in time, casting another shield to block the devastating blow and buying him a moment to recover. Meanwhile, Alec takes a step back, raises his hand and begins to construct magic circles around the monster as if conducting some grand orchestra. First 5 shimmering circles appear around the creature. Watching from a distance, Loki mutters that creating 3 magic circles at once is already insanely difficult. For Alec to create 5 simultaneously means he's some kind of genius. Kra calmly replies that Alec can do far more than that. Right on cue, Alec pushes further, and the number of circles surges. To Loki's shock, Alec manages to form 20 magic circles all at once, all aiming at the monster. The monster, sensing danger, tries to rush straight at them, but Rain jumps onto its back, climbs up its body, and stabs it in the tail, forcing it to stagger and giving Alec the final few seconds he needs. Rain then leaps off as Alec completes the spell and unleashes a colossal barrage of thunderbolts. Lightning slams into the monster, locking it in place with sheer electrical force. Paralyzed, it shakes and roars, pinned by the storm. Alec moves in to finish it with another strike, but the monster unexpectedly twists aside at the last second, narrowly dodging the killing blow. It immediately starts charging up its own magic attack, gathering energy for a devastating blast. Krasa quickly casts a spell to blind it, disrupting its aim. Yora follows up, summoning massive chains of light that whip out and bind the monster, trapping it in place. Rain seizes the opening, hurling his spear like a javelin. The weapon pierces straight through the monster's head, but even that isn't enough to completely put it down. Somehow, it still clings to life and starts building up its magic blast again. This time, Alec doesn't flinch. He calmly prepares a spell that only 2 people in the entire world know. The first is his teacher, Elders, the one who invented it. The second is Alec himself, who learned it directly from him. The moment the monster fires its massive blast at Alec, he uses reflection magic. The spell bounces the attack back at the monster, amplified to double its original power. Even that isn't quite enough to finish it. The boss survives, barely hanging onto life by a thread, and tries to charge the spell a 3rd time. Now Alec goes all out. He combines reflection magic with another array of magic circles, surrounding the monster in a blazing cage. When the attack lands, it engulfs the creature in a gigantic inferno. Flames and lightning twist together, burning it down to ash and charred fragments. Rain dashes in and finishes the job with one final slash, cutting the monster's head clean in half. At last it's over. They all exhale in relief and start celebrating their victory. Loki walks over and interrupts the moment to thank Alec for saving him, and for the help in the battle. He says he already knew about Alec's reputation as the former court magician. Alec answers that he quit that job. Loki shrugs and says that's the prince's loss. Then he casually drops a bombshell. The monster they just defeated wasn't the floor boss at all. It was only a sub-boss that had chased Loki too far and ended up isolated from its usual position. Alec and the others are stunned. If the sub-boss alone was this powerful, how terrifying would the real floor boss be? Loki explains that the actual boss is a necromancer wearing black knight armor. Physical attacks don't work well. They're only useful to stall for time. The real damage has to come from powerful magic. He then turns to Alec and pulls out a magic wand topped with a cross-shaped head. Alec seems to recognize it immediately. Loki reveals that it's an ancient artifact. The moment Alec takes hold of it, the wand transforms into a sword. Rain narrows his eyes, suspicious. He asks why Loki would just hand over such a valuable artifact. Loki laughs and says his plan is simple. He's going to use Alec as bait in the vanguard. Everyone is taken aback. Loki explains that Alec looks like a frail, unassuming mage. If they send him out in front, he'll look like an easy target, and the boss will focus on him. While the monster is lured in, the others can set up a coordinated ambush and bring down an S-ranked boss, earning all the glory. While Alec and his friends are fighting for their lives deep in the dungeon, meanwhile, on the other side of the continent, the prince and his party are also inside a dungeon. But unlike Alec's group, who are moving smoothly through dangerous caves and defeating enemies far above their level, the prince's party looks like complete amateurs. They're running around in a panic, desperately trying to escape from a pack of low-level caterpillar monsters. The prince is confused and humiliated. Just a few months ago, these kinds of weak monsters wouldn't have even counted as a warm-up for him. Now somehow, they feel insanely hard to deal with. He screams at his mage to use offensive magic and blast the creatures away. But the mage is so terrified she can't even cast a spell and breaks down crying instead. The prince snaps, calls his companions a bunch of useless low-life losers, and turns to face the monsters by himself. He declares that he'll finish them off with a single sword strike. He charges in and swings with all his strength, only for his blade to bounce right off the caterpillar's tough skin. The impact sends a painful shock up his arm. Without any pause, the monster slaps him aside, knocking him to the ground like a rag doll. His party members are forced to scramble in and drag him away as they all continue running for their lives. Being carried on his teammates' backs, the prince keeps thinking that something is seriously wrong. His body feels heavy, his movements sluggish, and even his sword feels ridiculously hard to wield. He realizes that all of this started right after he fired Alec from the party. Back then, Alec had been an excellent court magician. His support magic was so smooth and natural that the prince and his party truly believed they were just incredibly strong on their own. In reality, Alec had been boosting all of their stats far beyond their real limits. The prince, of course, refuses to accept that. Instead, he convinces himself that Alec must have put a curse on him out of anger after being kicked out. When he returns to the palace, the royal physicians treat his injuries. As soon as they're done, he summons his personal mage, Vogan, and orders him to find out what kind of curse he's under. Vogan examines the prince carefully for a while, and then calmly reports that there is no curse on him at all. The prince can't believe it. He tells Vogan to check again, insisting there's no way he would struggle so much against a weak level 30 monster when he's already conquered floors past level 40. Vogan thinks a bit, and then suggests that the problem might simply be the lack of support magic that hits the prince's pride. He snaps back that he doesn't need any pathetic support spells. That kind of magic is for weak adventurers who can't stand on their own. Vogan knows full well that the prince is a thick-headed idiot who doesn't understand how anything actually works, but he keeps that to himself. Instead, he asks if Alec hadn't at least warned them that the 30th floor would be difficult because reinforcement magic doesn't work properly there. The prince dismisses the idea immediately. Alec is a mere commoner, he says, and there's no way someone like that would know anything important. Vogan, however, doesn't buy that at all. He points out that Alec was part of the legendary Academy party that shattered records and reached all the way down to the 68th floor before graduation. The prince just laughs, saying no common peasant could ever achieve something like that. He claims those stories are just fairy tales made up by lower-class people to make themselves feel better. Vogan realizes there's no point trying to reason with someone like him. Before he can reply, a messenger opens the door and informs the prince that he has been summoned to court. The king wishes to speak to him about Alec, the former court mage. The prince rises and heads to the throne room with Vogan at his side. He finds his father seated on the throne and asks what he wants to discuss. The king asks him if he remembers the court mage elders. The prince doesn't recall much, since he was very young at the time. So the king begins to explain. Years ago, a noble named Elders was appointed as a court mage. His family was influential, so it was easy for him to be recommended and chosen. But Elders was different from the mages who served before him. He constantly spoke out against discrimination and told the king that the kingdom's structure needed to change. Angered by this, the king banished him, stripping him of his titles and his family name. Hearing this, the prince laughs to himself and says that's exactly what a foolish mage like that deserves. Even a noble cannot speak to a king in such a way. His father looks at him with sad eyes and continues. Elders, after losing everything, enrolled in the Magic Academy as a commoner. There, he excelled in every subject and graduated at the top of his class as valedictorian. Because of his overwhelming skill, he was chosen as court mage again, this time not because of his bloodline, but purely on merit. The king says Elders continued to pester him for a few more years, insisting that talented commoners should be treated better, and that one of them had even saved his life. But the king never listened. Then one day, Elders simply vanished. The prince doesn't understand why his father is suddenly telling him all this. Finally, the king gets to the point. He says that it's time to reform how the kingdom works. They need talented commoners like Alec. The prince is stunned. He insists that Alec is nothing more than a useless pleb who's good for absolutely nothing. The king answers by pulling out a torn piece of parchment, what's left of Alec's notes. On it, the entire 30th floor is mapped out in detail, the monsters that spawn there, the layout, and several precise strategies for clearing it. The king states that only someone who has cleared that floor multiple times could write something that accurate. The prince is shaken. Still, he argues that they can't ask a commoner for help. That goes against everything he was taught growing up, teachings that came from the king himself. At that, the king lowers his eyes in shame. He admits that his way of ruling has been flawed in many ways, but he's determined to fix those mistakes, step by step, starting now. From this point forward, he declares people will be judged on their skill and strength, not on their social class. The prince stares at his father in disbelief, then excuses himself from the court, claiming he is feeling unwell. Back in the dungeon, Loki is huddled with the others, still planning how to deal with the floor boss. He tells Alec that once they enter the boss room, Alec should only use the sword Loki gave him and avoid casting any magic at all. Alec still doesn't really understand the plan. He points out that the monster is supposed to be resistant to physical damage, so what's the point of using a sword against it? Kra suddenly catches on and realizes Loki wants to make the boss believe Alec is a swordsman, not a mage. That way, the monster won't see him as a major magical threat. But she doesn't fully get the idea either, since monsters usually attack anything that moves anyway. Why would it matter? Loki shakes his finger and explains that this particular boss is different. It's intelligent. It can think ahead and plan its moves. More than that, this monster is actually a swordmaster. That revelation shocks Alec, but also excites him. He genuinely wants to see a monster like that with his own eyes. They finally agree to follow Loki's plan. The only issue is that the boss room is still a long way off, and walking there will cost them valuable time. Loki has already thought of that. He says they'll just teleport. Yora is horrified. Teleportation magic is supposed to be top secret, used only by the highest officials of the kingdom. No ordinary adventurer is supposed to know it, let alone use it in a dungeon. Rain just shrugs. He says that if anyone would steal a spell like that, it would definitely be Loki. Loki quickly kneels and begins drawing a complex magic circle on the ground, while Alec chats with Yora about how. They all agree that if anything goes wrong, or if they get caught using teleportation magic, they'll just blame everything on Loki. Alex still isn't sure whether he should trust Loki or not. Yora answers honestly. Loki isn't exactly trustworthy, but he is reliable. 2 years ago, he led a raid on a high-ranking dungeon and cleared it without a single casualty. That surprises Alec. Yora adds that the leader of Loki's party is also known to be a genuinely good person, so teaming up with them should be fine. That finally eases Alec's worries. He stands up with a smile, ready for the final showdown. Once Loki finishes drawing the magic circle, everyone steps onto it. The ground begins to glow with a deep purple light. Yora watches in awe as the spell activates. Loki can actually use teleportation magic. He warns them to stay sharp and be ready, because they're going to teleport directly into the boss room. In the next instant, they're thrown forward and land in a heap on top of Rain. As they scramble to their feet, they see a massive dark knight standing in front of them, locked in combat with a party of 3 adventurers. The mage in that party shouts to one of his companions to run back and get reinforcements. They'll need at least an A-rank mage, or someone even stronger, if they want to make it out of this alive. The girl in their group immediately turns and runs, while the remaining fighter rushes the Dark Knight, attacking head-on. His strike is easily blocked. The mage fires off several fire spells, but the flames don't even scratch the knight's armor. The elf's face goes pale as he realizes just how outmatched they are. Before he can come up with any kind of plan, Rain sprints past them at incredible speed, thrusting his spear straight at the monster. The knight raises its sword and blocks it, pushing Rain back with overwhelming force. Rain's eyes light up. He's thrilled to have found such a powerful opponent. Meanwhile, Alec tries to flank the knight from behind for a sneak attack, but the boss suddenly leaps into the air, dodging his strike with agile movement that seems impossible for its size. The boss immediately turns its attention to its new challengers and charges at Alec and Rain, engaging them in a relentless exchange of sword swings and spear thrusts. Kra and Loki, meanwhile, pull the 2 other adventurers back to safety. Even after being ambushed by 2 fresh fighters, the floor boss doesn't falter. It shows no signs of weakness and keeps pressing forward, its rapid chain of attacks gradually driving Rain and Alec back and wearing them down. Rain decides to test a new trick. He rushes in with his spear extended in a straight thrust. Just as he expects, the knight jumps to avoid the attack. In that split second, Rain slams a spearhead into the knight's cloak, pinning it to the floor and trapping it mid-movement. That opens a perfect gap. Alec immediately dashes in and strikes. With one clean, precise slash, he cuts through the knight's neck and beheads it. The armored body collapses limply to the ground. They barely have time to breathe before the knight's body begins to move again. The headless knight stands back up, grabs its sword, and starts walking toward them. Alec realizes what they're facing now: a headless rider. The giant monster they fought earlier must have been its mount. The knight suddenly explodes into motion, charging forward at terrifying speed. Alec barely manages to block the incoming strike. If he hadn't, that attack would have killed all of them in a single swing. Rain rushes in with another attack, and together he and Alec manage to push the knight back for a moment. But the fight is far from over. The knight picks up its severed head and reattaches it to its shoulders. A surge of dark energy erupts from its body as it fully reconnects. It attacks again, faster and stronger than before. The knight's blade slams into Alec's guard. He blocks it, but the force blasts him across the room and smashes him into the wall. Thankfully, Yora manages to put up her shield just in time, saving Alec's life. He quickly downs a healing potion and steps back in to tag with Rain, giving Rain a chance to recover as well. They keep pushing through their uphill battle against the undead knight, while Loki quietly focuses on his master plan in the background. Finally, the moment comes for Loki to reveal himself on the battlefield. The entire arena suddenly glows with a purple magical aura. The knight immediately tenses up when it realizes Loki is a mage, the one thing that can truly kill it. The boss charges at Loki with incredible speed and slashes him across the chest before Alec can even move. Loki's body crumples to the ground, bloody and still, but it's all part of his plan. The Loki the knight killed is only an illusion. The real Loki's spell has placed the knight exactly where he wanted it. A series of ice spikes erupt from the floor and walls, trapping and slowing the monster. At that exact moment, Rain activates a teleportation trap, blinking behind the knight and stabbing it before darting away. The young fighter girl also jumps in to assist, joining Alec and the others. The knight manages to escape the trap, only to get caught again in another one. Furious, it climbs up the wall like a spider, trying to reach the mage who's been messing with it. Knowing Loki is too slippery, the knight decides to go after Kral instead. Loki won't allow that. He appears between them and blocks the attack with his magic blade. Yora quickly uses reinforcement magic and summons chains to bind the knight in place. Even though Loki isn't really a frontline fighter, he manages to hold the knight off just long enough for the chains to fully restrain it. Then he falls from the top, completely spent, and looks over at Alec. He tells Alec to finish it with his crazy magic. Alec steps forward and prepares himself. He summons a huge number of magic circles, completely surrounding the captured knight. The young fighter girl stares in shock. She's never seen anyone create even 5 circles at once. Loki, however, notices something is off. Alec looks dangerously low on mana. Even so, Alec keeps creating more circles, forcing his exhausted body to keep going. His legs buckle and he drops to his knees, worrying Rain. But Alec grits his teeth, stands back up, and pours in even more mana. He knows this attack has to end the fight in one blow. Once he's satisfied with the number of magic circles surrounding the floor boss, Alec finally triggers his spell. He uses his Thunderbolt magic, boosted with acceleration spells. The entire area erupts with lightning. The floor boss screams in pain as the magic shreds through it with overwhelming force. But even this isn't quite enough. The knight starts thrashing against the chains, struggling to move despite being electrocuted. Rain can't believe it. He has no idea how the knight can still move while taking such a powerful hit. Yora can feel her strength fading. She realizes they need to finish the boss quickly. She can't sustain her sealing spell for much longer. Alec knows Yora is at her limit and will collapse soon if this keeps going. He tries to force even more magical output, but his body simply refuses. He's already pushed himself too far. Watching from a distance, Loki understands what's happening. This is Alec's second enormous magical blast of the day. Any normal person would have gone into a coma after using half the mana Alec spent in his first fight. At the end of the day, Alec is still human, and he seems to have finally hit his limit. Alec feels like he's about to fail his party. He remembers the humiliation of being thrown out as court magician. He remembers how he abandoned his school friends in the past when they invited him into their party, and yet Yora still welcomed him happily into theirs. Rain and Kra have always trusted him, even in life or death situations. The weight of that trust crashes into his heart. Suddenly, he feels one last surge of strength. Alec steps forward, moving as if he's conducting an orchestra, waving his wand with precise, fluid gestures. The countless magic circles condense and merge into a single gigantic seal. From that circle he summons an incredibly powerful lightning dragon. his final all-or-nothing attack. Loki and the others are stunned by the sheer magnitude of the spell. The knight senses the danger too. It gathers all its remaining strength, breaks Yora's chains, and lunges straight toward her, hoping to kill the support mage and break the party's backbone. But Alec is already prepared. He sends the lightning dragon roaring toward the knight. The Dark Knight swings its huge sword desperately, trying to block the attack, but Alec's magic is far too strong. The dragon smashes through its guard and engulfs the boss in a blinding explosion of light and thunder. When it's over, the knight is gone, completely obliterated, leaving nothing behind but ash. Alec collapses to the ground, his energy completely drained. His body refuses to move, but he's relieved. The fight is over. His party is safe. No one has taken a fatal wound. The little fighter girl appears above him and thanks him for saving their lives. Her gratitude gives him just enough strength to sit up slightly and ask Yora if she's hurt. Rain and Kra arrive as well, thanking Alec for destroying the monster and saving all of them. Rain, however, can tell something is wrong. Alec has been hiding his feelings, and what happened to him while he was serving as court magician. Rain reminds him that they're his party members and his friends. He makes Alec promise to tell them what's going on in his head instead of bottling it all up. He says Alec used to be a happy, easygoing guy, but after getting banished, he turned into a gloomy, brooding emo. Rain's words hit Alec deeply. He realizes that he truly has real friends in this world now, and he promises that he won't hide anything from them anymore. Then Loki strolls over and loudly claims that he was actually the real hero of the battle, and deserves a little reward from the girls. That earns him a brutal beating from both Kra and Yora. Meanwhile, the long-haired elf approaches Alec, bows, and thanks him for saving their lives. He introduces himself as well, the leader of the top S-rank party in the guild, Requoma. Before Alec can say anything, the little fighter girl rushes over and kisses him on the cheek. She introduces herself as Belle, and immediately asks if Alec would like to do some dungeon runs with her alone. Yora shuts that down instantly, declaring that Alec belongs to their party, and will only explore dungeons with them. Loki joins the conversation and admits he's seen many mages in his adventuring days, but he's never seen so many spells deployed at once. He says that without Alec, they would probably all be dead. Rain overhears and tells Loki that means he owes Alec a huge favor. Loki agrees and talks briefly with Well, then announces that they're willing to give Alec a recommendation. Alec is confused at first, so Well explains. To qualify as an S-rank adventurer, Alec will need a recommendation from an S-rank party and an S-rank guild master. As the leader of an S-rank party, Well promises to gladly recommend him. They shake hands and then go their separate ways, happy to be alive, and proud to have defeated a floor boss that even an S-rank party had struggled against. Back at the guild, Alec receives a massive payout as a reward. The whole guild is buzzing with talk about how Alec and his party defeated the level 64 floor boss. Alec, however, is exhausted, and just wants a few days of rest to enjoy life with his friends. Before he can do that, the guild master stops him and says he has a visitor from Alec's old job. A knot forms in Alec's stomach. He's sure the prince has come to mock him or threaten his party. But the visitor is Vogan, the current court magician. Alec greets him and Vogan immediately gets to the point. He asks Alec if he had planned to kill the young prince in the dungeon. The blunt question shocks Alec. He stares at Vogan in confusion, but Vogan continues, asking why Alec never told the prince just how weak he and his garbage party really were. Alec replies humbly that even if he had tried, the prince never would have listened or accepted it. Vogan can't help but agree. He knows very well what kind of spoiled brat he's stuck working with. Alec realizes Vogan has taken his old position as court magician and tries to congratulate him. Vogan brushes it off, saying he's not a court magician. He's just a glorified babysitter for a spoiled child. He calls the job a huge waste of his time. Vogan explains that after Alec left, the prince tried to clear the 30th floor with his own party, and was badly injured in the attempt. Alec looks alarmed, but Vogan reassures him that the prince survived and recovered. Unfortunately, ever since then, Vogan has been ordered to accompany the prince everywhere. Even now, he was forced to escort him all the way to this city. Alec is left speechless for a moment before asking if the prince is here too. Vogan nods and says the prince still holds a deep grudge and wants to see Alec suffer. Alec asks where the prince is and says he wants to talk to him and settle things once and for all. Vogan leads Alec down to the training grounds, where the prince is waiting in the arena. The prince turns toward Alec and says that his father, the king, wants to change the kingdom's ways, and that he, the prince, had no choice but to go along with it. Alec is stunned to hear that, but the prince keeps talking. He says that just because he's agreeing doesn't mean he actually believes in it. In his mind, nobles working alongside peasants is a fate worse than death. Commoners like Alec should obey every command of the elite nobles whose blood is pure and sacred. The prince grabs Alec by the shirt and starts crying, shouting that someone like Alec could never understand the pressure of being good enough to become the next king. Alec admits that he probably can't understand that pressure, but he still tells the prince that his entire mindset is wrong. If the prince had listened to Alec's advice, he would be stronger by now, and in a much better position as an adventurer. The words hit the prince where it hurts most. He screams at Alec to shut his peasant mouth, and draws his sword, challenging him to a duel. He shouts to Vogan to remember his promise. If the prince wins a fair duel, Vogan must convince the king to abandon his reform plans and go back to treating peasants like peasants. Vogan grumbles but eventually agrees to the terms. The prince immediately rushes Alec and swings his sword. Alec parries the attack easily, and notices that the prince has two small ancient dagger artifacts on him as well. The prince tells Alec to face him properly, and keeps up a flurry of attacks. Alec blocks them almost absent-mindedly. His thoughts drift back to the time in the armory when he suggested that the prince switch from a heavy sword to lighter daggers since a sword was too much for him at his current level. The daggers have made the prince faster than before, but he's still nowhere near Alec's level. Alec simply steps aside, causing the prince to stumble and eat dirt. Infuriated, the prince gets up and attacks with everything he's got. Vogan finally admits out loud that he forced the prince to switch to daggers because he can't stand fools who don't know what they're talking about. Alec keeps deflecting every strike, then shoves the prince back and draws his wand, deciding to take things a bit more seriously. The prince glares at the wand, remembering how helpless he felt when he couldn't clear a single floor on his own. That's when he realized the only reason he ever felt powerful was because of Alec's support magic. He had searched for other explanations, curses, sabotage, anything, until Vogan eventually showed him the shredded remains of the plan Alec had written before leaving the capital. On those notes, Alec had meticulously drawn each passage, described every monster, and explained how to defeat them. He'd even taken the prince's personal strengths and weaknesses into account, and suggested the best way forward tailored just for him. For the first time, the prince was forced to admit that Alec was a true genius, but he couldn't bring himself to accept it. Now, furious and desperate, the prince screams at Alec to reveal his own artifact and show his true strength. Hearing that, Alec decides to end this farce. He draws his ancient sword. The moment it appears, its aura alone is enough to make the prince tremble and almost wet himself. Alec dashes forward. In a single instant, he closes the distance and swings his sword with full force, sending up a massive cloud of dust. When the dust clears, the prince finds himself lying on the ground, shaking, but completely unharmed. Alec's blade struck the ground right beside him. The prince finally breaks down. He tells Alec to just end his life since he's amounted to nothing. He tries to provoke him by bringing up how cruelly the party treated Alec before. Alec just laughs softly and offers his hand. The prince, calmer now, gets up on his own and apologizes for how he treated Alec in the past. He takes out the court magician's robe and holds it out to him. Alec stands there confused until Vogan explains that the king wants him back as court magician, and shows him a parchment with the royal seal. Alec looks at it and asks if that's an order. Vogan replies that it's a request, not a command. Alec smiles and politely declines. He says he's now part of a party he can't abandon and doesn't want to return to being a court magician. The prince tosses the robe at Alec's feet and turns away, telling Vogan to follow. He needs to go train more. Alec watches him leave and realizes that today, the prince has changed at his core. Maybe now, the kingdom really will be in better hands. Part 6, rewritten the next day. Alec gathers his friends and asks if they're free because he has a favor to ask. They all say they're available, until he mentions that he wants them to show him around the city. Immediately, Rain clutches his stomach and dramatically claims he suddenly has a terrible stomachache and will have to spend the entire day in the bathroom. Kreia also remembers something important she has to do, and quickly leaves the room, telling Alec to go with Yora instead. Yora laughs awkwardly at her friend's obvious attempt to act as her wingman. She asks Alec if he wants to postpone the city tour to another day. He says it's fine. He only needs one person to show him around anyway. Yora's eyes light up, and she happily declares that she'll show him every place she knows. They start at the marketplace. Yora explains that Fizzle is basically an adventurer city, so you can buy weapons, gear, and potions almost anywhere. But if Alec wants to find truly valuable items, he needs to understand the market properly. She warns him to watch out for shady merchants who try to scam clueless newcomers. Then, immediately after saying that, she almost falls for a merchant selling pills that supposedly make you look like Sabrina Carpenter. Alec grabs her hand and pulls her away, and Yora's heart skips a beat. They continue their tour around the market. Alec says that in the future, they can let Rain or Kreia handle some of the shopping. Yora strongly disagrees. The last time she asked those two idiots to shop for the party, Rain bought extra swords so he could cosplay Zoro, and Kreia bought a giant teddy bear. Yora says they can never be trusted with party shopping again. Alec silently thinks Yora isn't much better, since she just tried to buy candy and shady pills. He tells her he'll handle the party shopping from now on. Yora is relieved and happy to hear that. After a while, they spot a cafe, and Alec suggests they take a break. Over a cup of coffee, Alec asks why Kreia and Rain seem so hostile toward Loki. Yora says it's a long story and begins explaining. She says it all started before Rain received his artifact. Back then, he was as careless and sloppy as ever. He used to swing his weapon around recklessly on the battlefield, but once they returned, he took extremely good care of it. Alec remembers that habit from their academy days.
Yora reminds Alec how, back in their academy days, Rain refused to buy a new weapon because he cherished his old one so much. Even when it got chipped or worn, he still kept using it, fixing and polishing it himself. Then she gets to the main story. About 2 years ago, they ran into an A-rank party inside a dungeon that was struggling against a powerful monster. Yora's group decided to help them. Coincidentally, Loki and Well were there at the same time, so all of them teamed up for the fight. During the battle, Rain threw himself in front of one of the A-rank adventurers, using his own body as a shield to block a deadly attack. He pretended he was fine, but on the way back to the exit, he collapsed from his injuries. Loki and Well helped carry him out, but even unconscious, Rain refused to let go of his spear. He gripped it so tightly that the spear kept smacking into Loki's head with every step. Eventually, Loki lost his patience. Annoyed, he tossed the spear aside, saying it was too beat up and Rain should just buy a new one. Alec finally understands everything. Yora explains that Rain was furious when he woke up and realized what happened. To make it worse, Loki told him to stop whining like a puppy and said weapons are meant to be disposable tools, nothing more. If Loki had just kept his mouth shut, the whole thing might have blown over. But thanks to that, he and Rain still can't see eye to eye. Alec then asks about Kra's problem with Loki.
Yura says Kra just finds him obnoxious and thinks he only ever brings trouble with him. After that, they resume their shopping trip, reminiscing about their academy days when they had to pool their money just to buy a few potions. As they're walking, Yura suddenly spots a rare accessory, an elven ribbon that boosts magic power. She really wants it, but when she checks the price, it's a bit too expensive for her budget. She hesitates, fidgeting, and wondering what to do. Before she can decide, Alec steps in and buys it for her without even trying to bargain. He tells her she deserves it because her magic is what keeps the whole party fighting. Yura is overjoyed to receive the ribbon. They continue their tour around the city and eventually end up at the top of the bell tower, watching the sunset spread across Fizzle. Alec quietly says that now, he finally feels like a real adventurer. Those words suddenly make Yura uneasy. She admits that when she first met Alec in the capital, she felt like she was taking advantage of his situation. She knew he'd just been fired and lost his position, and in that moment she dragged him into her party. Now she wonders if their party is really the right place for him. She tells Alec that if he has greater ambitions or bigger dreams, he's free to change his mind. Alec shakes his head and says it doesn't really matter to him anymore. He tells her he's over his past now, and that he likes the idea of becoming the strongest adventurers together with his friends. Yura lights up at that. She tells him he'd better keep that promise, and threatens to send Rain chasing him to the ends of the world if he ever runs away again, especially since she knows he has a bad habit of keeping things bottled up. Alec suddenly says he has a confession to make. Yura's heart jumps. She closes her eyes and leans forward, expecting something romantic. Instead, Alec says that since he lost his bet with Rain, he's no longer allowed to keep anything to himself. Yura freezes, then turns away, furious and embarrassed, hiding her bright red face so he can't see it. The next morning, Rain yanks Alec's blanket off to wake him up, telling him to stop wasting so much time reading complicated books. Alec says he's trying to figure something out, but Rain brushes it off and says the only thing he needs to figure out is his daily routine. Adventurers are supposed to start their day early. Once Alec gets ready, he suggests they begin their day like usual. Rain gets instantly hyped. Their usual morning routine is a mock duel with wooden swords. The girls, as always, are not fans of this much noise and energy so early in the day. Alec says he needs to catch up to Rain and the others after 4 years of barely fighting as a court mage. Even so, he manages to keep up with Rain without much trouble, until his wooden sword finally shatters. Alec complains that he was sure he'd win today, but Rain tells him not to dream about beating him, not even in 100 years. Rain then challenges Alec to a rematch using their actual artifacts, but Yura jumps in and stops them before things escalate. Right then, Loki shows up and smugly asks if they need help from an S-rank adventurer with their morning training. Nobody really wants to deal with him, so they start walking away. Loki shouts after them, asking if this is really how they plan to treat the man who just gave them an S-rank recommendation. Everyone stops and turns back. Yura steps forward and demands to see the actual S-rank card. Loki toys with her for a bit, then says he'll hand it over only if Rain apologizes for being rude to him all the time. Rain clearly doesn't like that idea. Before the argument can go further, Well and Krista arrive. Krista bonks Loki on the head for being annoying and then tells Yura they came to deliver the S-rank card on behalf of their guildmaster. Well explains that based on their recommendation and the guildmaster's approval, Yura's party, lasting period, has officially been promoted to S-rank. Yura jumps with joy at the news. Krista tells Alec that as an S-rank party, they now have access to Arcana dungeons, which are even more dangerous than the 64th floors of regular dungeons. Alec is stunned. Krista and Well tell him to seek them out anytime he needs help, since they still haven't fully repaid their debt to him. Loki tries to use the cheerful atmosphere to get closer to the girls and invites them to lunch. Instead, they shove him away and announce to the guys that Loki wants to treat everyone to a meal. Alec and Rain immediately agree since they're hungry, Loki tries to take it back, saying he never offered to feed them. But Alec and Rain are in the mood for free food and drag him along anyway. Soon they're sitting in a restaurant, feasting. Alec happily talks about how they're really an S-rank party now. Rain warns him that if he starts his self-deprecating nonsense about not being worthy of the party, he'll beat him up right there at the table. Alec laughs and says it's nothing like that. He just wants to enjoy the moment with everyone. He tells the staff to bring them the most expensive liquor they have, and Loki is already on the verge of tears. The party goes on late into the night. Yura, who has a weak tolerance for alcohol, passes out after just a bit of drinking. Alec says Yura is completely drunk at the celebration, and Kra tells Alec it's not just the S-rank promotion. Yura is overjoyed that Alec chose their party over going back to the king. Alec says it's all in the past, but Rain is still pissed. He wanted to be there when the prince tried to take Alec back so he could break every bone in his body. Suddenly, the guild receptionist rushes in, asking for Kra. Inside the infirmary, beds are full of injured adventurers. Kra assumes it's a monster raid, but the receptionist explains it wasn't monsters. It was the Shadow Guild, criminals who ambush adventurers. The guildmaster shows her a heavily wounded girl, Olivia, the famous swordswoman from the S-rank party Nameless. She's covered in deep cuts. As Kra begins healing, Olivia wakes up, panics at the mention of the Shadow Guild, and curses a traitor who caused all this. She begs Kra to heal her quickly so she can go hunt them down, but collapses before she can argue more. All night, Kra cleans and heals her wounds, wondering who could injure someone as strong as Olivia. Meanwhile, Alec is in the library researching Arcana's labyrinth dungeons when a boy calls his name. He introduces himself as Leorg Luo, from the S-rank party Nameless. After Alec bribes him with dessert, Leorg explains he's heard a lot about Alec and invites him to join Nameless on a dungeon raid. The next morning, Kra checks on Olivia again. From outside she hears counting. Inside, Olivia is sitting up in bed, still injured, but repeatedly practicing sword swings with a wooden sword. The guildmaster looks exhausted. Kra scolds Olivia for reopening her wounds, and yells at the guildmaster for not stopping her. Olivia snaps back, saying her legs still don't work and Kra should do her job and heal them so she can finish what she started. The guildmaster demands to know who attacked her. Olivia refuses. Kra kicks him out of the room so she can change bandages in peace. Olivia asks why Kra isn't prying like everyone else. Kra remembers the rage in Olivia's eyes the previous night, and calmly says she doesn't interfere in other people's business. That finally relaxes Olivia. She apologizes for acting like a brat despite Kra saving her life. Kra gives her a soothing kiss on the forehead, calling it a magic technique to help her rest. The warmth reminds Olivia of her mother's kiss. She asks for something warm to drink. Kra gives her tea and steps out. Back at the training grounds, Alec tells Rain and Yura about Leorg's invitation and the labyrinth raid. Rain jokes that Alec must have fallen for Leorg's charm and casually mentions Leorg is an elf, older than all of them combined but still looking young. Alec explains Nameless is aiming for the final floor of the labyrinth, but because of complications they'll be busy with something else. They want Alec's party to clear the final boss and retrieve the dungeon core crystal instead. The reward would be huge: fame and money. Leorg's reason: Nameless is going after the Shadow Guild for daring to attack Olivia. As a sign of goodwill, he gives Alec the dungeon core crystal of the previous floor. Rain finds it suspicious. They're being sent straight to the second last floor, and Nameless will even deal with the Shadow Guild. Sounds too convenient. Yura, however, trusts Leorg. He's weird, but he's the only one who keeps his crazy party functioning. Rain decides to just go with the flow. They decide to pick Kra up and then head to the labyrinth dungeon. But as they reach the infirmary entrance, a receptionist bumps into them, out of breath. She says something is wrong with Kra. Inside they find Kra staggering through the hallway like she's drunk. Alec catches her as she almost collapses. She explains that Olivia drugged her and ran off to the dungeon alone to take revenge on the person who betrayed her. Rain is annoyed. He says Kra is too kind and should have left Olivia in pain for a while. Kra snaps back that Olivia is badly hurt and could die fighting like this. Rain argues that Olivia's an S-rank adventurer. They don't need to chase after her every time. Kra cuts him off. Olivia could only run because she healed her legs, so this is her responsibility. She'll go save Olivia even if she has to go alone. Of course, Alec and Rain refuse to let her go by herself. They gear up for the dungeon. Rain says they were going there anyway, so this is just a small detour. They arrive at the labyrinth dungeon, a maze full of teleporters that send people to random places. Many adventurers enter and never return. Just as they're about to go in, Belle from Rechroma pops out and scares them. She clings to Alec's arm and says the dungeon is scary and that he should hold her hand so she doesn't get lost. She explains that Leorg sent her to help them and that she wanted to see Alec's staff casting huge spells again. Yora doesn't like anyone touching Alec. She shoves Belle away and says their party isn't like Nameless. They actually care about teamwork and synergy, so the four of them are better alone. She explains to Alec that Nameless may be a party on paper, but they all fight like solo adventurers at their own rhythm. Rain adds that Leorg is the only reason they even formed a party. Otherwise they'd still be solo. Belle defends Olivia when Rain calls her rude. According to Belle, Olivia is a sweetheart inside. When Belle was younger, Olivia always gave her sword tips and never turned her away. Yora cuts the story short and sends Belle back to inform the guildmaster that Alec's party is entering the dungeon. Before leaving, Belle asks Alec to bring Olivia back safely. Inside the labyrinth, Kra lays down emergency teleportation circles in case they get separated. Rain teases her for acting calm now after crying for Olivia earlier. Kra drop kicks him in the face. He falls on a magic circle and triggers a teleport trap. Alec tries to pull him out but steps on another trap. Both vanish. Alec appears alone in a cavern full of pig-like monsters. He quickly wipes them out with thunderbolts. An arrow kills a monster behind him. Kra is on a ledge with her bow. After clearing the room, she points to his friendship band saying it's linked with hers. So wherever one is teleported, the other appears nearby. Yora and Rain have the other pair, so they're probably fine. They move through disgusting monster-filled caves, fighting together smoothly. Alec finds a bloody bandage on the floor. It's Olivia's. Meanwhile, Yora and Rain are running from a horde after Rain opened a sketchy door. Because it looked interesting, Yora uses earth magic to rise above the monsters and tells Rain to kill the leader. With her buffs, he tears through the horde and decapitates the leader in one strike. The monsters scatter and they move on. Alec and Kra finally find Olivia near an entrance, more bruised and battered, trying to re-bandage herself. She demands Kra heal her again. Kra refuses. If she heals her, Olivia will just run off and get herself killed. Olivia asks Alec if he knows healing magic, but he says he only knows offensive spells. He sits beside her and tells her Kra just wants her safe. She freaked out while they searched. Olivia softens a bit and warns Kra not to trust people so easily, since she already tricked her once. She stands up and says if they won't heal her, fine, but they'd better not stand in her way. Kra tells Alec to block her path, then asks Olivia if she's chasing the Shadow Guild. Olivia scoffs. Those weaklings couldn't even touch her. She's after someone else, the teacher who betrayed her and left her mother to die. She steps into a teleportation trap telling them to go back. Instead, Alec and Kra jump in with her. They land in the middle of a monster nest, surrounded. Alec charges in with his sword. Kra starts casting teleportation magic, and Olivia jumps in to fight despite her condition. Kra builds a teleport circle, but just as it's about to complete, the magic shatters. Alec realizes there's an anti-magic field on his floor. No spells, no teleporting. They'll have to fight their way out with pure skill. Olivia and Alec stand back to back, cutting down monsters in a flurry of sword slashes. Olivia fights with scary precision, the complete opposite of Rain's wild, instinctive style. Alec tries to imitate her efficient movements and improves mid-battle. She admits he has talent, but hasn't mastered his weapon. He has to treat his sword like part of his body, not just a tool. Kra eventually locates the direction of the anti-magic source, but there are too many monsters. Olivia charges anyway, cutting down huge monsters like it's nothing. Alec distracts the rest, drawing monsters away from her. He barely survives a flying monster's attacks, tricking it into colliding with a big hobgoblin, but the bird still survives. He keeps it busy, buying Olivia time. Olivia finally reaches a monster mage holding a strange artifact. She kills him instantly and destroys the artifact, lifting the anti-magic field. Kra finishes a teleport circle. Alec blasts monsters with Thunderbolt. Olivia fights her way through, and all three escape the nest. In a safe area, Olivia asks why Alec never told her he's a mage. He thought it was obvious. She yells that no sane mage runs into a horde with a sword. She thanks him, admitting she would have died alone. Kra warns her healing magic isn't perfect. If Olivia keeps fighting, her wounds will reopen worse than before. Olivia then reveals the truth about her revenge. After her mother died on an adventure, a man named Mel found her and became her master. She saw him as a father, obeyed every order, until one day, after clearing a dungeon, he stabbed her and calmly confessed that he was the one who killed her mother. She shows them the scar. She says she has to find him and kill him or she'll never be able to live normally. Alec puts his coat on her shoulders and promises to help her fight Mel the Blade Master. Kra also promises to heal her as many times as needed. Meanwhile, Rain and Yora encounter members of the Shadow Guild in the tunnels. Rain destroys them easily. Yora ties them up. He demands to know how someone this weak harmed Olivia. The Joker-like leader laughs and says Mel the Blade Master defeated her alone. Rain decides they should regroup with Alec and Kra, take these criminals to the guild, and then plan how to deal with Mel. But the Joker activates a dungeon core, blowing up the ground, killing his own men, and knocking Yora out. He grabs her and runs with Mel. Rain chases them in rage. Alec's group hears the explosion and finds a huge hole. Olivia jumps down, finds something and tosses it up. Yora's hat. Yora wakes up elsewhere, tied up before the Shadow Guild leader. He says he knows her well, which creeps her out. Before he can hurt her, Rain drops in from above, impales the Joker and rushes the leader. The man draws a mana sword and blocks Rain's attack. He rips off Yora's magic bracelet so she can't be tracked, knocks her out again, and escapes with her and Mel. Rain swears he'll kill them painfully, but first has to fight the hooded mage. Rain smashes his sword and stabs him through the stomach, but the man stands back up, using blood magic to pull spilled blood into his body and form a new sword. He introduces himself as Gloria the Blood Mage, and says no matter how many times Rain kills him he'll always come back, even without his head. He creates weapons and whips from blood, beats Rain brutally, and slams him into the ground. Just when it seems over, Rain stands again, remembers Alec's advice about letting go of his weapon, and uses his spear as a distraction to close in and punch Gloria in the face. We see a flashback to Rain's school days, where he dueled Alec with no magic and learned how stubbornly Alec adapts to any situation. Back in the present, Rain pours everything into his fists, breaking Gloria's guard and smashing him into a wall. But Gloria cuts himself to power up even more, creates a giant blood tornado, and aims it at Rain. Rain accepts his death, until Alec appears and uses reflection magic to send the attack back at Gloria. Gloria survives again, and transforms into a monstrous beast, bites Rain's neck, and forces Alec to fight alone. Alec bombards him with lightning, but Gloria's speed and blood regeneration make him almost unstoppable. Rain somehow rises one last time, and drives his spear into Gloria, triggering a huge explosion. Alec can only wonder if this final attack will be enough to kill the immortal blood mage, or if Gloria still has more tricks left. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.